This is the fucking like fifth time I've heard this in a month from Democratic politicians, that we need a strong Republican Party. This is something we hear way too often from Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. And specifically, she keeps saying this and giving this needless credence to the Republican Party and the GOP, which has always been, and especially recently, a party that tries to inflict bad things upon the country. And that's how it needs to be looked at. But there are a lot of liberals, older ones specifically, who like to think of the Republican Party as something that could ever be a benevolent force in this country. And that's some sort of mythology that I'll never understand. Here's Nancy Pelosi.
I think our country needs a strong Republican Party. It's very important. And for him to try to have it every which way. But we will be going forward to make sure that this never happens again, in terms of to investigate and evaluate what caused this, and both in terms of the motivation, but also in terms of the security that we have to have as we go forward, recognizing how inflaming even some of our elected officials can be.
Okay, so again, this is so frustrating because it ensures that none of this sickness that we're seeing will ever be rectified, because she's seeing this problem as a Trump-related vacuum problem, and the elected officials are some sparse actors that have been influenced by the rise of Trumpism and aren't an emblematic core emotional response as manifested in human beings in the party. And yet she continues to say that we need a strong Republican Party. She thinks it's important. In the voters' eyes, that is the strong Republican Party. Trump is 53%, the overwhelming favorite. Mike Pence is next in terms of who Republican voters want to run for president in 2024. Mike Pence has, 12% to Trump's 53%, and then his son is the third in terms of polling. You can't divorce the Republican Party from their voters. Their vision of strength was Trump. He's like this caricature of an alpha man that they saw. So that is their definition of a strong Republican Party. What is her view of a strong Republican Party? One that holds the Democratic Party's leftist flank accountable, but does it quietly so she doesn't have to do it herself? Is that her definition of it? Because the voters, they chose Trump. They chose Marjorie Taylor Greene. They chose Jim Jordan. They chose all of these horrific human beings, fascist light, whatever you want to call them, not to throw that term around loosely, but that's their definition of strength. And so her definition is, as it always is, entirely removed from what the voters want. She wants there to be this sort of playpen in the House and in the Senate where Republicans can kind of capitulate to their base, but they don't have to actually do their bidding. No, they are responsive to their base. And the problem is that you have chosen not to defeat them, but to enable them.
Yeah, I mean, this is why Andrew Cuomo and the IDC is, illustrative infinitely, because it's when the Democrats don't have Republicans, then especially particularly the corporate-leaning Democrats in leadership, when they don't have them, they invent them, basically, with the IDC. Like, they love having the right as a counterbalance against a left that they came into office never prepared to really deal with. And I don't know, I can't imagine a Republican saying we need a healthy Democratic Party, because that's depressing your own vote when you say that. We need a healthy party in this country. We don't have a single one. We have two that work for basically oligarchy, one that's more owner oriented and one that's more management oriented, and the Democrats in the latter. But we need to get rid of the Republican Party. We need the Republican Party from 170 years ago.
AKA an actually progressive party.
Abolitionist party.
Abolitionist party that came in the wake of a neoliberal Whig party that was not abolitionist enough and didn't want to deal with it. They were actually fine with slavery because it allowed them to continue playing the center. What does that remind you of? And again, we're not third partyists. I don't want to speak for Matt here, but I don't see a third party as really a viable solution right now. But I do see disciplining Nancy Pelosi for this kind of talk as important. So that's why I wanted to cover this on the show today.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think if there is a candidate, I remember getting an argument like when I barely knew what politics was on Facebook, like 2007, saying like the Republicans are the Whig party, right? But if you actually look at based on like demographics and that sort of stuff, everyone saw the Republican Party coming to an end. But when you actually look at the politics of it, it is the Democratic Party that's the Whig party, and it is this inability to confront evils baked into the economic system that might ultimately sink them. I think like third party it's the thing where like coming from North Dakota, where we had a successful like 100 years ago nonpartisan league run on both ballots, Democrat and Republican, to take state power. It needs to start locally. I'm very skeptical of third party runs that don't start with a local base of power, because I think often, whether it's Green Party and presidential candidates, which I don't trust, or the pro-weed people running against Ilhan Omar in Minnesota, like it's clear what this is. This is a reactionary front group, but actually like building power locally, like Kshama Sawant in Seattle, for instance, just to name one, like that. I think that's what's needed. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of we've talked about some of the unserious third parties before, where it's basically just posting.
We don't the posting party. Anyway, I just that clip's a few days old at this point, but we were away, and that just like, I don't know, that kind of stuff really grinds my gears.